Good evening, everyone. I am recording this so that those that cannot attend will be able to watch the copy of the video when it gets posted online. My name is Ben Seiden. I'm the Vice President here at Laberge Group, and we're holding an informal public meeting this evening. It's really a public information meeting about the Village Dissolution Study and Plan. If you recall, at our initial meeting, we had discussed having two meetings during the process, one at the beginning and one at the end. In order to afford more opportunity to discuss the project and answer questions that may have arisen during the process, we have offered to have and host this additional meeting this evening. This is not an official village board meeting, it's a project information meeting. I'm going to ask that you all mute yourselves for now, and there's a few things we'll go over as we go along. Again, my name is Ben Seiden, and with me tonight is Kathleen Rooney and Lucy Stites from our team. So what I'm going to do is share my screen so you all can see a copy of a PowerPoint presentation. We'll go through the PowerPoint. It'll take some time. So those of you that are standing at Village Hall, please find a seat and get relaxed. Those of you that are home at your home computer or in your living room, thank you for inviting us into your house. As I mentioned, you may have met us before back at the Village Hall. My name is Ben Seiden, and Kathleen Rooney is here. We have been working diligently with the village and the town to develop a study and plan so that you all have as much information as possible should a referendum go forward to make your decision on how to move forward. What we're going to be going over this evening is a little bit about the meeting. We're going to thank the village board and town board, but we're really going to spend time talking about what a board-initiated process is, how dissolution may affect you as residents, both in governance and services, answer questions on the fiscal side as to what happens to your village assets and liabilities, discuss what may happen to your village laws, and understand for you all what the fiscal impact of potential dissolution is with you. At that point, we're going to open up to public comments, questions, and answers. And along that line, because we are doing a meeting online and in person, we're going to ask questions to be put into the chat box as we go through the evening, and we're going to answer those as well as those in public at the Village Hall back and forth. Should you be at the Village Hall or in person, we're going to try to limit those questions to new questions. So listen carefully to both the presentation and to the people before you to make sure or to see if your question's already been answered. I do want to give a shout out to the community and thank you all. You've provided numerous questions already on our website through the public comment section. We did our best to respond to as many as we can. I do want to point out that we've developed a very thorough presentation, which is different than what we had thought about when we envisioned today's meeting. I had originally envisioned today simply being a Q&A process, but by developing this presentation, we believe we've answered probably 75 to 80% of your questions so far. So at the completion or the end of the presentation, should you still have questions, again, please use the chat box or if you're in public, sign up with Robin and we'll go through the process one-on-one. I do want to let you know that as I'm giving the presentation, I won't be looking at the chat box. Lucy will be with us for about 20 more minutes, half hour, so she may be able to, but we will go through those chat questions at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time during the next 2 hours, if there are additional questions, please feel free to continue to use the question and comment online. I do get those and I respond to as many as I can throughout the week. So to begin with, we always want to thank the Village of Tannersville and the Town of Hunter boards, as well as all of your staff that have worked with us over the last 4 months to provide insight, information, and data so that we can do what we do, which is provide an unbiased informational guideline and a dissolution plan so that you have that information to make your decisions. It's a daunting process. And I do want to give that thank you to all the elected officials and the staff because they have to do this work on top of their everyday work. And I understand the time commitments that it takes for you, and I want to let you know that we appreciate your efforts on behalf of the residents. So some of you may not have been, or some of you may have been at the first meeting, but everyone that's joined us so far already knows that there is effort underway, a village board initiated process to begin discussing a dissolution plan. But what is a dissolution plan? And a dissolution plan addresses all the legal requirements outlined in Article 17A of the New York State General Municipal Law. Back in 2010, Governor Cuomo created a new New York law, and that lays out what has to occur both in a citizen-initiated process and in a board-initiated process. But in this process here, prior to the referendum, a dissolution plan will provide you, the residents, with information on how it may affect you. It discusses and lays out the impact on governance and representation, the future condition and provision of services, what could be the potential estimated impact on your taxes at the end of the day, what we're going to do with, not we, but what the village is going to do with their assets and liabilities, and how that will be carried on post-dissolution. There has to be a section in the document that reviews the impact of existing village local laws and the codes that are on the books today, and what's going to happen to those laws over the next 2 years post-dissolution. It's also going to discuss the potential transfer or elimination of positions, and finally has to have both the date of dissolution that's proposed and the cost of that dissolution. We pointed this out before, but it is part of the process that while this plan is the village's plan, and it will be voted on by the village board and potentially a referendum, the post-dissolution plan is not binding on the town. So the town participates throughout the process, but they're not required to do anything in that plan post-dissolution. But this plan does lay out the village's wishes, what's going to happen to its assets, liabilities, laws, and governance. And because the town was part of the process, we hope that should this go forward, that the plan as voted on will be enacted going forward. We mentioned before, and I want to mention again, because Article 17A does lay out two different types of government reorganizations. One is a village dissolution, and the other is a consolidation. In a dissolution, only the village residents vote. It terminates the village, and the plan is developed by the village, but town government, again, does not have to adhere to it, and the town government makes all decisions. In a consolidation, both the village and the town vote, meaning that residents in the village vote and residents in the town vote. Again, if you recall, in a dissolution, only village voters vote, but in consolidation, both vote. In addition, it is not a plan that's created in a consolidation, it's a negotiated consolidation agreement that both boards adhere to as well going forward. And the end result of a consolidation is still the ending of a village, but it's a different process. We just point that out for you to know, as anyone that's going to go back and look at Article 17A will see there's both a dissolution and a consolidation. And often there are questions as to what is one or the other. In a board-initiated dissolution planning process, it's a little bit different than a citizen-initiated process. In the citizen-initiated process, you lock into a timeline that is 10 days to certify the petition, 30 days to call a meeting to have the vote, and the vote is 60 to 90 days. And you're not required to have a plan before you vote. In a board-initiated process, there's not a timeline. It allows you to do the data analysis and preparation of a report and plan, and you are required to have a plan before you vote. It's a very critical difference between the two. One is a quick requirement that requires the vote without a plan, and one requires a vote with a plan. So a board-initiated process, which is the way the village has decided to go, provides the village residents and the town government, village government opportunity to clearly and cooperatively and collaboratively develop a plan, and then get that information out to you, the residents, in a non-rushed format, and then allows you to have time to digest that information prior to a potential vote. So the process that where we are right now is we have already developed and collected the data. We've interviewed and developed and worked with your stakeholder groups. We've studied the impact of dissolution, and we've developed a draft study document and provided our work product to the village board. Over the next week, that report will be provided out to the public for your digestion. And we do it this way so we can explain the process, the data, everything that we're doing to develop a plan, and then you're able to read the plan with that knowledge as to how it was created. Once we release the plan, and after tonight, the village board will have time to review that document, and then they will then endorse the plan if they want to, then hold a public hearing on the plan, which is required, and then they'll revise the plan as necessary. And then they have the decision at that point to stop the process or to amend the plan adopted as final and set a referendum date. On a timeline, here's your timeline. It began back in February 12th, when the village board voted to explore the process of dissolution. In April 14th, they held their first informational meeting. And then now in August, we're having a second informational meeting. Between April 14th and August 20th, we developed a draft plan collaboratively with the village board, with the town board, with the stakeholders, and those that are actually providing those services on a day-to-day basis. September 12th is the date the village board will potentially endorse or review that proposed plan. Should they endorse the plan, the earliest day that they can have a public presentation and a public hearing, the plan will be November 4th. November 12th, then they will either vote to stop the process or continue the process forward towards a referendum. Because the village elections are conducted by the county will be impounding their voting booths after the general election. The county has given us a date of January 14th as a preliminary date, should the village choose to go forward with the referendum. And in our plan and in our discussion back in April, we picked December 31st as the proposed date, should there be a dissolution that it goes through. And we chose that date to give the village and the town an opportunity to actually close down village government, ramp up town government, create the districts that are required, do the transfer of the accounts, develop those executor documents that were transferring all the grants from the village to the town, to close out the separation of the assets, meaning the sale of those assets or the transfer of those assets and the covering those liabilities. Often people forget how difficult village government is to actually do. And we always choose as long as you can to be in the process of that implementation, so you're not slamming it in 3 months. That being said, this was a locally driven planning process. We had oversight from the mayor, the deputy mayor, and village clerk and treasurer. We had two separate work groups. One was a public works work group, which covered water, wastewater, and DPW and the like. And one was land use that covered the planning, zoning, and codes. We had representation, both the village and the town, on both of those work groups, because we really had to understand what they do today and how it can be provided tomorrow. The process of a village dissolution, as you know, focuses on the services that you have today, the people that are doing those services, the village identity, village laws, codes, planning. So the question isn't so much just simply what happens with dissolution, it's what happens post-dissolution, and how that can be provided and how those services can be provided. We provided the opportunity for community stakeholder input throughout via the website and public engagement and input and feedback. And we were trying to use the website as the methodology for providing feedback, so everyone has an opportunity to ask questions and to review those questions and provide the same answer to everyone. The planning process, again, during the work groups, review the data and provide analysis. We proposed a preferred post-dissolution framework for those services and discussed those different models for providing services once a town has to provide those services. In other words, who would be providing them, how would they provide them, what would the organization look like. The work groups did provide input on staffing and resources needed. We strategized together on approaches for integration of local laws and land use, how we're going to create those boards and develop those equipment processes. We also looked at framing the options to support the transition. We also spoke to key stakeholders and figured out the provision of data and information. They participated in many interviews and provided ongoing input and feedback and support, and identified the key issues that we needed to understand as we develop this process. Finally, the report that will be provided and discussed today does provide what it would look like. This is not a dissolution plan in this process, an board initiated process, is not a should we or shouldn't we dissolve. It is, if you dissolve, what's the plan for that dissolution? And if the village decides to go forward with a vote, it's a vote on that plan and a vote on dissolution. We work closely with the process in the community, so we want to make sure that we proactively address concerns. There are many concerns. From the first public meeting, We want to share the facts and dispel misconceptions about a government takeover. We want to answer questions, and we want to make sure that that was the first step towards building consensus and finding common ground. And it was really a learning process for us as the consultants to understand what was happening in the community, why this process was becoming, and discuss from there any solutions that occur. The website was available to everyone to ask questions. It was provided and updated as regularly as we could, primarily every other week on Fridays. So there are a number of key issues and touch points that came up during the questions and answers, during the initial meeting, and during the comment section. Most of it was centered around representation and voice in government, a village versus a town. It was also discussed that we had to make sure that should the village dissolve into the town, that the village identity was still secured and protected. A lot of questions came up during and surrounding about critical services. And what's going to happen to our water? What's going to happen to our water rates? What's going to happen to our DEP sewer services? Will it still be continued? Will the city honor its current agreement with the village and the town? Who's going to take care of the snow plowing of roads and sidewalks? There's also a number of questions during the process on the community development of grants that's already been undertaken by the village. And what's going to happen to the downtown revitalization initiative and all the different Department of State Parks and Recreation grants you currently have on lakefront and beach improvement projects. Who's going to maintain our village parks? Who's going to continue to invest in our water system? And what kind of commitment would there be by the town to continue to seek grants that the village was doing already for the people and folks within its boundaries? There are questions and comments about village zoning and quality of life and the laws. And there's a very big push on how you're going to protect the village assets for village residents and taxpayers. So we hope that throughout this process over the rest of the presentation, we'll be able to answer most of those kind of questions and comments as we go forward. So at the beginning, we have to understand how will dissolution impact our services, our governance, and our processes. Number one is governance. How will the proposed dissolution impact who and how decisions are made related to the village services? And we want to look at a couple of things here. I think I missed a slide. Let me go back. No, I did. So when we talk about village dissolution, we talk to community residents, we talk to you about what this all means to you. You may have heard me say at the first meeting, you have to make a decision for yourself as to does dissolution make sense or sense? Does dissolution make sense with an S? Because it makes sense governance wise. And does it make sense fiscally? Will I save money? And if I save money, how much is that? And what's that worth to me? You know, what's the balancing between sense or sense? So on governance, you individually, every voter has to decide, you know, how will a dissolution impact you individually? How will decisions be made according to or related to your services and codes? Fiscally, you want to understand, will this reduce my costs now or in the future? And with services, will the services continue to be provided to me? Who will be doing them? Will they be improved? Will they not be improved? Will they be more effective and efficient? Who's going to take care of my zoning? Town doesn't have zoning right now. What's going to happen in my zoning? And will they maintain or change my quality of life? That's all part of your discussion and your internalization of dissolution as you learn about the information that we're providing tonight. We're not voting. As the consultants, it's not our decision whether or not you dissolve or stay a community. All we're supposed to be doing is giving you the information so that you can make an informed decision whether or not you want to vote for dissolution as you go forward. With representation and governance. Post-dissolution, it would eliminate the village board. If you dissolve, the village mayor and board of trustees, who are right now elected just by you and for you and represent you and set policy for the village, will no longer be there. Post-dissolution, the town board will be responsible for all decisions made townwide, including the area formerly known as the village. And that's a key point for you all to understand, that should you vote to dissolve the government, you're dissolving the governance. That's the village board, that's the laws and that make up the community. Right now, you have a sole input on your village decisions. Um, your village board makes up 100% of the decisions, and your village electorate is who puts them into power. If you dissolve, you have to recognize that village voters only make up 20% of the town-wide electorate, meaning that you're now only 20% of the voice in government versus 100% in the village. There are 395 registered voters in the village and a little over 2,000 in the town. So your voice may be smaller in a town government. Whereas right now, again, you elect solely for your own governance a village board. However, it's important to understand that there's a long-term sustainability issue with small governments in New York State. It is not a knock, it is not a prop. We're not saying good or bad, but we have to let people know that in smaller governments, there are some challenges for capacity building. There's challenges getting people to run for office. There's challenges getting people to work in the government. Whereas in a larger government, in a town your size, it may be easier to get more volunteers or staff or those willing to take on the role of an elected official. The town of Hunter has a larger population, larger tax base, and more resources. And combining governments could result in a stronger organizational structure. But I can't say yes or no. All we can let you know is that individually, you control your governance as a village. Collectively, the village voice goes down. But there are challenges with smaller governments, which is one of the reasons why villages do embark upon a investigation, if you may, whether or not dissolution is good for them or bad for them. We also want to talk a little bit here about the current state of your public works. Currently, your village public works has one supervisor and 3 laborers. They do a whole lot of work for the amount of staff that they have right now. And regardless of the outcome of this process, regardless of whether or not the village board endorses the process and wants to go towards a vote, or even if you do choose to dissolve, I think that everyone, when they see your workforce in the roads or on the sidewalks or in your homes and the restaurants, you should really take the step to slap them on the back in a positive way. Not pushing them out the door, but actually congratulating them for the work they do. Because they maintain all of your streets and streetscapes, parks, recreational facilities, all your public spaces. They take care of your storm system. They're working with the DEP buyout properties and beautification, and they do support your public events. They do a heck of a job with the parking lot, sidewalks, and street and road snow plowing in the winter, to make sure that the roads are safe, not only for travelers, but really early in the morning for the school district. They also maintain all of your water systems. And for those of you that don't know, you have 2 plants, reservoirs, towers, and lagoons. They all take care of the dam, the distribution system, and metering systems. They also fulfill all the obligations of the water system, sewer plant, and school districts related to rights of ways and easements and agreements. So they do a lot of work. It's always interesting to me and Kathleen as we go through these processes, and we've done 2 dozen or so of these, how much work villages do with so little personnel and people. But if you do choose to dissolve, the town model would be that the working supervisor would be assigned full-time to the water department and report directly to the town board. The laborers would go to the highway department, report to the highway superintendent, and the laborers of the village today and the new enlarged highway department would assist the water department as needed with water breaks or valve change, whatever has to occur in the water system as you go forward. The town would continue the village process of contracting with the water treatment operator to provide that 24/7 required emergency response services and oversee the operations and the water testing that's required by the Department of Health. In a chart format, we can show you here. And again, no one has to take notes. The entire presentation is going to be available online tomorrow, so you can download, read it again, and then ask more questions online. There's a lot of information here, and I recognize that, and I'm sorry for it that I have to go through all of it like this, but it'll all be available to you both in online, and you can recap by looking at the video. Currently, again, the Public Works Department does all the snow plowing, and the town officials indicate that they'll provide the same response and resources as the village. Again, the folks that currently work in the village will be provided the opportunity to move over to the town. The town knows that they will need additional staff to do this work, and they're committed to staffing the required level necessary for both the snow plowing and the water system, the street maintenance and the like. On the streets, they're going to maintain the village streets and streetscape and drainage as is. On the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plant, they're going to provide the necessary services to abide by the agreements and the obligations. We've already contacted with DEP, and they've already recommitted, and we'll go over it later in the PowerPoint presentation, but they've already recommitted to the folks here in the village and town that the agreement for the wastewater treatment plant stands. The agreement itself does have that successor clause in it, and they've also provided documentation they'll continue. So that's not an issue. So the town will continue with the obligations on the water and wastewater. They're also going to assume responsibility of the parks and public spaces. They're going to upkeep the parks, trails, and public spaces. They're going to continue the grant opportunities and implementation of grants that the village has already received. And they're going to make sure that the parks and public spaces continue to be maintained and used the way they are today. On street lights, currently the village has 10 decorative fixtures and maintains their own street lights. The town is going to create a lighting district. The boundary is the same as the former village, and they're going to maintain your fixtures. And then on the beautification program and special events, the town will continue the programs going forward. Also along the lines of the public works and services, post dissolution as it relates to equipment and vehicles, the water system, parks and recreation equipment would transfer to the town to provide those services. Those additional equipment or services, equipment and machinery would be auctioned. If the town doesn't need them, the village would offer the town the right of first refusal to purchase vehicles and equipment through negotiated sales. The town could assume operations 3 to 6 months prior to the date of dissolution. We've done this before. Normally, if the village chooses to dissolve, we work with the village and town to do what's called an IMA, an intermunicipal agreement, 3 to 6 months prior to that date, so that the transition of services can occur, the staff can move over, the realignment and reorganizations can occur, any potential transfer of equipment can also happen during that time frame, and then any additional equipment or assets that's no longer needed by the town or is not in a negotiated sale from the village to the town when they get auctioned off, and it provides the village opportunity to work and get rid of or dispose of its unnecessary assets in a timely fashion without disrupting any services. Post dissolution with the highway garage, the plan of the town is to continue to work with the village and the county and the New York City DEP buyout program with a dedication by agreement that any net proceeds will go to offset the village liabilities. And then chips that you get directly from the state, which is the Consolidated Highway Improvement Program, those dollars will continue to come to the community, but be transferred to the town on an ongoing basis. The village does not lose that. Well, the village government won't be there, but the residents will still get that money. There's always a fear that if I dissolve my community, I lose that state aid, and that's not true. The town aid gets increased in both the town and what the village had before. Post dissolution with the water services, that came up during the initial meeting, and it's a key part of the overall plan. The town would create the Tannersville Water District, and the boundaries would be those that are equal to what you have today as the village boundary. They're going to continue to service all the users inside and the few that are outside. After dissolution and after the water district is created, they would then extend the district to the additional town users that are out of district users right now to encapsulate everybody that is currently served by the water district. The town would then assume ownership and responsibility for the operations, the capital improvements, the maintenance of the assets. They're also going to continue to be the executor of any of the properties and agreement obligations the village currently has. As I mentioned before, the town will continue to contract for a wastewater, or in this case, a water treatment plant operator, to provide the ongoing system maintenance, and will provide the 24/7 emergency response through that operator. They're going to assign the working supervisor that currently works in the village to the water department, and directly responsible to the supervisor and the town board, and the town highway will provide staff support. Water is not a typical town highway function. Many towns have both a water department and a highway department, and that's how it would work here. The laborers will go to the town highway department, and the working supervisor right now in the village will staff the water department of the town. Over a 5-year period, the town will remove the outside village rate differentials between the village and the few people that are outside right now in the town. So that would change the overall usage of the 5 years of the cost to the village residents. Right now, you have about $500 a year for the single family residential user, and over the 5 years, it would move up and even out to $575, give or take. The commercial base rates will also result in an increase in the village. Should you do that through the equalization, because there'll no longer be a village and an outside village rate, it'll shift to a uniform rate, but it'll happen over 5 years. It won't happen on day one. Excuse me for a second. A major concern of folks online and at the initial meeting was what's going to happen to the sewer. And there was I guess, a fear of the big bad wolf of New York City reneging on its contract. When you review the initial 1924 agreement, which both the village and town are part of, it states that the DEP will own, operate, and maintain the sewer treatment plant. The village owns the land and the right-of-ways, and the village is obligated to provide the services as outlined in the easement ROW right-of-way agreements. But the system is completely funded by DEP. When you review that agreement, there is a successor clause that clearly states that the system will continue to be paid for by DEP. But we did take a lot of effort of the village attorney, and our team to reach out to the New York City DEP, and I'll read this to you just so you have it. But the entity that assumes the village's powers related to the sewage system, which is the successor entity, will also assume the village's rights and obligations. Paragraph 10 says that if a party to the agreement transfers its powers to another entity, then that entity shall assume all powers, rights, and duties, and the successor entity's rights and obligations on the agreement will be identical to the village's current rights and obligations. And because the city does not currently charge system users for sewer, a village dissolution will not alter that arrangement at all. That's a letter from the general counsel dated July 8th. So that confirms our interpretation and the village attorney's interpretation of the agreement in place. So if you choose to dissolve, one less question is what happens to your wastewater. It'll continue to go as is. Post-dissolution is going to impact your central administration in the village. Currently, the village clerk treasurer, she coordinates all the operations with the village board, trustees, staff, and public. The village clerk maintains all of your records. She's also the FOIL officer, birth, death certificate, individual, human resources, prepares all the board agendas, board meetings, and public notices. She also handles all of the accounts receivable, budget development, billings, meter readings, long-term debt. Everything that happens in that village on a day-to-day basis pretty much goes through the village clerk and treasurer. And she also somehow has time to prepare and administer the grants you currently have, and that's about half her time right now, since the village has been so successful with their grants. And the clerk treasurer also serves as secretary of the planning board and support for the ZBA. So what's going to happen post-dissolution with the town's input is they recognize the need for the equivalent staffing. They're going to create a full-time administrative position for grants. That's also going to include the water department work, fiscal work, planning board, and zoning board support special events. They're going to add a part-time fiscal admin person to support the extended budget and fiscal workload for the process, and add additional hours to town clerk's function to handle the expanded FOIL requests, records requests, permit issuance, and collection functions. So the position will have to transfer over to the town and then be shifted amongst the way the town provides the services to the residents. Justice Court. If you all recall, you have both a village justice court and a town justice court. The village court right now has about 397 cases last year in 2023. The village has a part-time justice and a part-time clerk, and they generate local revenues that do offset the majority of its expenses. In other words, while government is not supposed to be self-funding, it's not supposed to raise enough money through fees or through fines. In this case, with the court, you pretty much cover the cost of the court with the retained revenues that come through. The town court handled about 1,177 cases and has 2 part-time justices and 2 part-time clerks. Post dissolution, the town and village courts will have the same categories of offenses. The village justice court will be eliminated. The cases will have been discussed with the town, and the town justices feel they have enough capacity at town court that they can handle the additional 400 cases or so, 397 from the village court. They would, though, consider increasing the part-time court clerk hours to handle the additional caseload. Land use planning, zoning, and code enforcement. We had a very in-depth discussion with the land use work group, and it was agreed that it's important to protect the natural, unique nature of the village. It's also important to protect the town outside the village as far as land use and development, where the village is more dense than the town. They each have a comprehensive plan. The village has a zoning law, and the town does not yet have a zoning law. The town was successful in securing a grant this year to update its comprehensive plan and is considering zoning as part of that process going forward. As I mentioned in the first meeting, and I'll mention it again today, all village laws stay on the books post dissolution for up to 2 years, meaning that in that 2-year period, the town will be administrating the village laws as is, or they can either amend them or get rid of village laws. But after the 2-year period, they all go away if they haven't been incorporated into the town. The village zoning laws and town officials, they indicate they're going to continue the village laws post dissolution. It makes sense to continue to protect that unique fabric that is the village today with density, land use, and zoning. Even though they don't have zoning right now, they would administer the village's zoning. So to do that, they'd have to establish a ZBA. On a planning board side, the town of Hunter's planning board would assume the responsibilities of the planning board of the village. Right now, the village board of trustees acts as the village planning board, and they right now review site plans, special permits, and they provide other planning functions. So the town would have to create or reconstitute its planning board to include representatives of the village. And I said they have to. They have a planning board right now. They don't have to reconstitute. We recommend that they redevelop that town planning board to include members of that are familiar with the village zoning today and the village planning today. So that's more inclusive and more knowledgeable of the issues affecting the village as you go forward. On code enforcement, the town also recognizes that it's going to have an increased work. They have a part-time code enforcer right now, but it has to be expanded. So they're talking with us about including expanded hours in zoning enforcement and code enforcement, and talking about how to deal with their short-term rentals and the like. So they recognize that there's going to be additional hours and effort that's going to be included in their part-time code enforcement hours to handle the additional village work. I mentioned a few moments ago, but I want to restate that all village laws and ordinances are in effect for up to 2 years. So the current village zoning will be in place until the town incorporates it into their own. If the town does a new zoning ordinance, they can either incorporate the entire village code into their new, or they can change or amend or make it hybrid. But they've already committed to continuing zoning going forward. They want to integrate your zoning into theirs. So as they're doing this, that 2-year process provides time for the town to complete its comprehensive plan and either create a new zoning ordinance townwide or to incorporate the villages into a special type of zoning in the town. They're going to evaluate the current zoning law, they'll look at the districts, they'll look at the uses, and see how that would relate to a new town zoning law. Or they could, if they don't have zoning coming into place during those 2 years, they can just simply adopt the village's law into theirs. They want to make sure that their definitions and their codes and their regulations mesh with yours. So that 2-year process allows that meshing, that integration going forward. If the town already had zoning, then there'd be sort of a hybrid approach, but that's not the case here. Right now, they don't have zoning districts, so all your additions can easily transfer into the town as you go forward. So village quality of life, local laws. You have a lot of local ordinances and laws in the village. Examples are your water ordinance, the park regulations, or your motorized vehicles on the bike path, or the prohibiting motorized vehicles on the bike path. Those codes will all go through a process of review, and they'll either be incorporated into town law, they'll be repealed or amended over the 2 years, during those 2 years. If nothing happens in the 2 years, then they're all automatically repealed. So those 2-year process allows the town attorneys and town board to look at each law individually and see how it was created and why it was created, or the existence of the village, and then incorporate them into theirs if they're similar, or remove them, repeal them if they're no longer needed. That process again occurs over those 2 years. This an interesting little wrinkle in this is that the town opted out of the New York State cannabis program, but the village opted in. So you have a few, at least one, application for a cannabis dispensary in the village currently under review by the state. If the state provides a license to that dispensary, that'll continue going forward. So there may be a potential impact. Because the town is not, though, participating in the program, the tax benefit that would have come to the village, should there actually be an approved dispensary, will not be recognized because they cannot share in that tax benefit. That's a complication, a little wrinkle in the process, but the village right now has opted in. If there was a licensed dispensary provided, they can share in the tax benefit from the state to the county and the county to them. The town would not be able to do that because they did not opt in. At this point, I'm going to ask Kathleen to talk about the plan for disposition of village assets and liabilities. Kathleen, I'm not sure whether or not you're still muted or not, but if not, can you start with this product? Kathleen? Let me see where Kathleen is. Kath, are you muted? Let me try to find her. Yeah, Kathleen, you're still muted. Are you there?
Then you have to take that first initiative for the video as well. I can't do it myself.
You can't do what yourself?
I cannot put the video on for myself.
Oh.
And that's why I didn't have the audio as well. So thank you.
Let me look at you. And thank you, co-host. You should be able to put your video. Oh, now you're off again. You're on again.
Good evening, everyone. Before we get started, I just noticed a number of chat box comments that this process is a done deal. We are still in draft mode, and one of the main purposes of tonight is to get feedback on some of the thoughts and processes on the preliminary preferred options, so that the village board can hear them and we can make those changes that that the village board may consider based on what they hear from you this evening. So I think your comments and your thoughts are going to be very, very important to the overall process. So I just wanted to quick say that and just make sure I could clarify that. So what I wanted to just talk about first is what will happen with the assets and liabilities. And we kind of looked at them side by side and together. And we wanted to see generally what would be the theme as to how the assets and liabilities would be disposed of. And I think the general thought was that the village assets should really, to the extent possible, go to the benefit of the village taxpayers. So the thought process we used was to really focus it as to use assets and to liquidate a number of the assets in order to pay off liabilities that the village has. Because if with liabilities that would remain on the books post dissolution, those would be the responsibility of the village taxpayers. So we wanted to get rid of as many of those as we possibly could. So just taking first look at the village's infrastructure and properties. The water infrastructure, parks, recreation, bike trail, and public spaces. The thought process was that those properties would transfer to the village for continued use for the water district, for the water infrastructure, and parks and recreation, the bike trail, and other public spaces to be used for the public as it is right now. Those are community assets that I think the town felt are essential to the overall, the greater town community, as well as to the village community. The village hall and firehouse, the thought process here is to sell those assets eventually in order to pay off village liabilities. However, we know that the timetable for this would put a strain on both the fire district, the Tannersville Fire District, as they're a tenant in the building, and also the town's short-term space needs issues would create stress if we were to try to sell those immediately. So we're looking at a staged process for those pieces. And then the Public Works Garage, it is anticipated that they would continue to be placed in the flood buyout program. And that 55 Spruce Street, which is your other property, is planned for sale prior to the dissolution. And then the existing DEP buyout properties with the long-term conservation easements, those would transfer to the town for ongoing property stewardship. And the sewer property would be a transfer to the town pursuant to the sewer agreement. Then if we could go to the next slide. So the equipment pieces, the water equipment and the recreation, parks and recreation equipment, which would include the stage, the mobile stage and trailer, were envisioned to transfer to the town, similar to the properties for the continued community use. The other pieces of equipment, as Ben indicated, would be sold. However, the village and town discussed a possibility of the town needing some of that equipment, and that there would be a negotiated sale prior to the public sale if in fact they came to an agreement. And you can see here the estimated values of those. Next slide, please. The other asset of the village will be whatever its fund balance is at post-dissolution. We don't know what that will be. The really latest data we had, kind of closed out by the village's accountant, was 5/31/23. So just to give you a feel, the general fund at the end of 5/31/23 that was not encumbered, meaning that it wasn't tagged for particular projects, and it wasn't appropriated in the following year's budget, was around 421,000. That, whatever that level is at the time of dissolution, is part of that package of assets. The water fund assets, the the preliminary plan would be for those to follow the water service and go to the new Tannersville Water District, which the water district would have the same boundaries as the current district is. So then on the flip side, the village has outstanding bonds as liabilities. There's a compensated balances, which are the payments owed to village employees for vacation accruals that they have not as of the time of dissolution used. And then there are retiree health benefits. In discussions with the village attorney, the town clerk, and the mayor and deputy mayor, there were not any other they don't know of any other pending lawsuits, judgments, or settlements that would materially impact village liabilities. So, and then the largest of the liabilities obviously is the village bonds. The snowplow bond and the water tower bond are come due fairly close to the time of dissolution. And so it is recommended that they be sort of the first of the long-term liabilities after payment of the short-term to draw down using village assets. The water treatment plant upgrades as of 5/31/24 still had $2.1 million left to be paid. And just as a note, the village does have short-term bond anticipation notes and that relative to its grants that it has. The two major grants that the village has are reimbursement of expense after the expense is made, and then you have to claim. So they need a revenue stream during the project development and project closeout with the grantees. So those have a mechanism for repayment, and that is the actual grants themselves. Next slide. So this slide takes the estimated asset values, which is the top, and then it also has the estimated values of the potential liabilities on the bottom. And we broke it into like a phase 1 and a phase 2. Phase 1 are those assets that the village could probably get liquidated in a relatively short period of time. Whereas the part 2 would be assets that may take a little bit longer to sell and get the funding for. So we looked at phase 1 assets being used to offset the shortest term liabilities. Obviously, the village is going to have to pay out all of its accounts payable, then its compensated balances, it has its retiree liabilities. And then we do believe there would be enough for the to pay off the snowplow outstanding debt service and the water tower as well. What still is remaining is the water treatment plant outstanding debt. And that is paid currently as annual debt service out of the water fund paid by fees. There is a strong potential that there would be assets sufficient enough to partially pay down part of that remaining outstanding debt. Not all of it, but part of it. Given that the way the bonds are written, it would be paying them off in reverse order. So right now, the bonds payments end in 2051. This would bring the bond payments, would end them probably 15 or 16 years earlier than that, which would then enable the water fund to then have the resources for any other next large project that it may have. Next slide. Next slide, thank you. So the assets and liabilities piece has its own set of issues, and it will also flow into what is the fiscal impact. And I know this is the part that, just watching people's comments, this is really the piece that you're interested in. So the Village of Tannersville taxpayer will see a reduction in their combined property tax and water bills. The primary driver of that reduction in property tax is the shift of village costs to town outside village taxpayers. You have a very significant differential in a taxable assessed value on a townwide basis relative to the village. So that's going to drive that drives the biggest piece. And to put it in simple terms, if there were no cost savings found, there would still be a reduction in the village cost because of the way you're going to tax for it. The next biggest piece is the citizen empowerment tax credit, which Ben talked about earlier, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail as well. The reduction in costs is fairly minimal in the entire process. Your community has a pretty strong division of labor and a history of shared services. So there's not a lot of opportunity to eliminate duplication or find economies of scale. So we were able to find some small things around the margin, but as you can see, that is not what is driving what we'll see in a minute. And what I mean by the division of labor is you have the town already provides townwide police, townwide ambulance, townwide assessment, dog control. The village delivers a lot of the parks and recreation services and water services. Those are not things that the town has. So there aren't any duplication in any of those materially large program areas. And then the last piece that does impact is the last discussion we had on use of village assets to pay down liabilities does impact the long-term implication for village taxpayers. So just to give you a feel, we're shifting right now. The town or village levy is about $447,000. The plan, the model that we put together shifts 371,000 of that. 314 is going to the town tax base. If you look at the chart, you can see the material difference in the size of the village taxable assessed value at 68 million versus townwide taxable assessed value at 394 million. And there is a piece that's going to go to the new town outside village taxable assessed value, which would be approximately 304,000. So you can see you're shifting it from a much smaller tax base to a much larger tax base. Just quickly, I know we've talked about this before, but the tax credit is equivalent to 15% of the combined village and town tax levies in the year prior to dissolution. This model was based on the 23-24 village tax levy and the town's 24 levy. And then it's the combined levies, and in the town, it is not anything to do with special districts. It's just general fund and town outside highway or town outside village. And then it's equivalent to 15% of that combined levy. And as you can see, 100% of the CETC represents $480,000. That's larger than the town or the village levy is right now. So you can see how that is materially impacting the fiscal model that you're going to see in a minute. The town would be mandated to apply 70% of that tax credit to offset property taxes. Each year, the CETC is in law, written as in perpetuity, and so that it's ongoing. However, it is subject to state appropriations, and since its inception in 2010, There was only 1 year, which was relative to the fiscal crisis, where all but 5% was paid out. So here is what we modeled would happen to, we're looking at a single family home with an assessed value of 81,000. We're using 81,000 for this particular presentation because it represents the median. It's half of the assessed values for single family homes is below that and half is above. And so what you'll see is that we are recognizing two things going on. We're recognizing the current tax bill, and then we're also or the tax bill from 23-24. And if you look, you'll see the village tax payment goes from 529 to 0. The tax payment would go from 452 to 703, and the water fee would go from 500 to 575. So for this home with that value, if there were no CETC applied, there would be a savings of approximately $200. If 70% of the CETC were applied, it would be $272. And if 100% of the CETC were applied, it would be $302. So what we did, I'm not going to go through this chart, but we put it in here so that we did a range in some of the FAQs coming in from folks over the last month or so. Excuse me, there was an ask for, can you show us a range? So I put this slide in here to give you folks a feel at different assessed values, what might be the impact. So we won't go through this now in detail, but know that it's there and you can look at it when it gets posted tomorrow. So this chart is about the taxpayers outside the village, the town of Hunter outside the Village of Tannersville, property taxpayer. I am going to just make a distinction that the chart, the summary chart here, would be for everyone outside the Village of Hunter as well. Their impact is slightly different than the town-wide. So if you're in the town outside village and there were no CTC applied, there would be a potential increase of around 4.7%. Once that CETC is applied, you would see a reduction of around 6%. And if the entire CETC were applied, you'd see a reduction of 10%. And this is one of the primary reasons that New York State put the CETC in place, because they recognize that it could potentially negatively impact people outside the village that is dissolving. And this was part of the incentive to not have that negative implication to people outside. At the bottom, for those folks that would be in the Village of Hunter, the impact is only, if you look at the chart above, it's only going to be on the town-wide line. So we just broke that out and put that down below. And so they'd see a 14.3% increase on just the town-wide and highway fund, if in fact there was no application of CETC. With the CETC at 70%, they're back to break even. And if there's 100% is applied, they too would likely see a decrease. So I know this is a lot of information. That's why we added in a couple of extra slides, just so you could take a look at it, tomorrow and figure out what additional information you may want or need. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Ben.
Thank you, Kathleen. I know that this CETC is still an issue of concern for people, and it happens in every single one of our studies. Is a question: is this in perpetuity? How does it get done? I know you covered it, but I want to repeat it another time for those that either didn't get it first, second, or third time, or still have the question. The law states that the CETC is good in is in perpetuity. However, it is budgeted annually, just like your school runs are, just like your CHIPS aid is, just like your aid to municipality is in the budget. So every year it gets included in the budget. And if you do dissolve, that $480,000 or so, what was that number up? 480,425 as of today will be in the state budget. It does get annually allocated like all other state aid, but it is in perpetuity and according to state law. I just want to restate that for those that are going to have that question again. Next steps. And the next steps of the village board has to review. Please. The village trustees has to review this draft plan. They're going to have this over the next month and they're going to deliberate internally. They'll discuss it. They'll listen to more comments from the public. But if they choose to move forward at all, they have to endorse the proposed plan. And the date that they have for the next village board meeting in September is September 12th. At that time, once they endorse it, they have to set a public hearing by state law. The state law will give them a date and a certain number of days they have to have. And that tentative date will be November 4th by the calendar we have. At that point, after the public hearing, the village board will then either vote to stop the process and say this doesn't make sense, or they'll adopt the final plan, and that's November 12th. If they adopt the plan and want to give the public the vote, then the board of trustees will set the date. And again, in consultation with the county board of elections who runs the village elections, the anticipated date for the referendum would be January 14th. I want to go back again and reiterate, there is no predestined or predetermined process. When a village board initiates the development of a dissolution plan, that plan is set forth in state law for what has to be put into that plan. And that's what we have developed, and that's what we went over today. If they accept it, endorse it, then it goes to another presentation where we review the facts again. And it's a public hearing at that point where it's a condensed presentation, and it's a hearing for you all to give your comments on the record at that point. Then they will either vote to continue the process or not continue the process. If they continue the process, then they have to set the date of the referendum and then you vote. And that vote is a simple yes or no. Shall the village of Tannersville dissolve? Yes or no? If the vote is no, dissolution will not take effect and nothing further will occur. It cannot be brought up again for 4 more years. The village town can continue to discuss enhanced shared services. They can still look at reducing things the village provides, the town can provide. They can decide that they want to get rid of the village court or keep the village court or anything like that. The village and town can still, though, pursue consolidation if that's an issue that they want to do. And the 3rd or 4th slide at the beginning, I went over the difference between a village dissolution and a consolidation. The primary distinction is that in a dissolution, while it affects town residents, only village residents vote. In a consolidation, both vote. But it's very rare that if a village dissolution goes down, that a consolidation begins. In fact, it hasn't happened that I'm aware of in the last 14 years. If the vote is yes, then dissolution will occur on a date set in the dissolution plan. We put in a date of December 31st, but the village board can change that. When the new New York law was created, excuse me, sorry, there was a language that allows the communities to pick the date of dissolution or consolidation. Again, we suggest the end of the fiscal year of a town, not of a village. So the town can proactively budget appropriately for the new services in the upcoming budget year starting January 1st. That being said, a village can pick any date to dissolve in a year. Some like to pick the end of a village fiscal year, and some pick the end of a town. The key point with that is if you pick a date post April 1st, you lose the CETC in that first year. The law states that CETC you're eligible for it if you dissolve prior to the end of that state fiscal year. State fiscal year is March 31st. So if you dissolve before March 31st, the following September, you'll get your first check. And it's really a wire transfer, but it's nicer to say you get your first check. If the vote is yes, the village will wind down operations over that year. Again, as we mentioned before, we laid out in our asset and disposition plan. They'll sell or transfer the properties. They'll sell and liquidate the assets as it's stated in the plan. The town will take steps to ramp up operations and their budget and the staffing. They'll arrange for staffing new equipment. They'll create the special districts, and the town and village will continue coordination to assure the smooth transition. So what we want to do here is, I know I asked most of you to refrain from asking questions during the presentation because most of the questions were answered. But I see there's a good number of questions / comments in the chat box. We also know that the Village Hall has folks there at the Village Hall that are available that want to ask questions. I just lost where my presentation went. There it went. Sorry, I was trying to get my questions and answers up. I'm going to try to move screens if I'm not going to be able to. So you're going to see a lot of the side of my head as I read questions. I apologize. Can the Village Hall unmute so you can ask the first question, the Village Hall? Well, as you're unmuting, I'll go through some of these. Is it possible to record for those that cannot attend? I believe I turned on the recording, so it should be recording at the beginning. Again, someone's talking about it being a done deal. This is not a done deal at all. The village, I can't speak for the Village Board of Trustees. But it's my understanding that due to the pending petition to dissolve, the village board chose to do a board initiated process to afford themselves and the village residents the time to do a thorough analysis and a plan. And I mentioned the time frame, but I'll mention it again. If it was a publicly or a citizen initiated process, the village clerk has 10 days to certify that petition. From that, you have 30 days to set a date of a referendum, and you have a vote between 60 and 90 days from that time period. There's no requirement for a plan or a study to be developed. So village residents, if you don't have a plan, will be voting on their heartstrings or their purse strings with no real information, just innuendo on Facebook. They felt that that's too short of a time to actively and cooperatively and thoroughly do a plan. So they initiated the process that we're going right now. With that process, we then have to create a dissolution plan for what the governance would look like post-dissolution. And it's not their endorsement, and it's not their saying you must do this. They're not saying I want this. They're giving you the ability to study, review, analyze, and then vote on, should you get to that point. But it's not a done deal.
Could you tell us who asked that question? It's up there.
Excuse me?
Could you tell us who asked that question just now?
It's not a question, it's a comment on the chat.
Okay, there's no name on the comment.
Well, there's someone named Barbara Bertone.
Okay, so have the name, that's all, okay.
I'm gonna, just so everyone knows, I am horrible at announcing or pronouncing people's names, so I apologize in advance for my butchering of people's names as we go through this. All right, Gil, my friend Gil, has a lot of questions, so we'll go through a couple of them. Just so you know, Gil, the majority of the questions you have are already answered in the FAQ. So I'm not sure if you're asking the questions for the public to hear again now, or if they're not answered already on the FAQ. I'll do the first one, and then I'll turn it over to Village Hall for one. It's how many different departments and government entities did you have to contact in order to put the report together? I'm not sure the purpose for that question, but we spoke to the department heads of both the village and the town, and the representatives of the town board, which is supervisor, deputy supervisor, and the village mayor and the village deputy mayor was represented in both communities. And we reviewed the services that are being provided by the courts, by the DPW, by the water, by the sewer, and by the appointed and elected officials that you have in the community. And we use that information coupled with the information provided by the budgets and the services and the state reports to develop the report that we have. Village Hall, do you have a question?
Village Hall?
Legal goes first.
Okay.
I just have a few comments. I did ask multiple questions. I formally submitted them. They were kind of some vaguely posted today answers. I'm Dr. Lee McGonigal. I was a former mayor for 25 years. I am concerned that if this dissolution was to happen, how would it be equitable for the village taxpayers that have built the infrastructure, the water system, and that to be just given away? In your preliminary study, I see today that you're giving away the stage to the town of Hunter rather than auctioning that off that asset. And that has been projected to take some of the village assets, auction them or sell them to reduce water debt. The current water debt on the new upgrades to the water plants is at 0% finance. So it's primarily basically just an expense on the water district or future water district. So why would you want to pay that down? There's really no gain. And village residents that built that system and paid that through the general fund, not through their water fees, for decades and decades, purchase of the system, the reservoirs and all the updates, they're basically going to get nothing in return for everything that they have built over decades. And I've been a resident here for over 40 years, had the largest business, was the highest taxpayer, had my home here, plan on staying here. But all those resources that have been given to the village through tax dollars in the general fund, not on the water side, are not going to be recouped by any village taxpayer. And it seems awfully quick to try to liquidate some of these assets, especially the village hall, given the fire department currently has a lease. How are they going to find new locations for the fire trucks? This is an incorporated village, and I consider it a business that has assets and resources, and giving them to the town or not getting reimbursed for them doesn't seem equitable. And I think you did a lot of good diligence, and I see some of the numbers just to disagree with some of them, and would like more substantiation of the $83,000 for future debt for the requirements of the village taxpayers for retirement and health for the few retirees that would be moving forward. So maybe that number could get broken down a little more specific.
Well, thank you. You hit a number of comments in that one comment. So I'll hit a couple and Kathleen will jump in and add to it or correct me if I say it wrong. Tomorrow, or when the report becomes available shortly, I can't say tomorrow, and it's up to the village board when they release it on draft format. There is more discussion of what happens to the fire and the other buildings. And Kathleen mentioned it, but she can go over it again. There will be a transfer to the town of that property with the agreement with the fire department can use it until they either buy it or they can move someplace else. But it's not going to be kicking out the village fire department in a year. As far as
Could I just add a little clarification? Sure. We brought in the village attorney to help us think through models that would help us for a legal process that could extend beyond the date of dissolution, because we did recognize that how important the fire district is to the community and to community safety. So the concept is to in the short term, for some designated period of time, enable the fire district as well as the town to be able to use the village hall asset, giving both the district and the town time to deal with their space need issues. Upon that time, then the assets could be sold, and those assets then be used to offset the liabilities. And that's when we were talking about that there were some assets that would be, you could have liquidated in a shorter period of time, and some that we felt, particularly the village hall, maybe a longer period of time, recognizing the other important community needs.
I do want to mention, and Lee, you are absolutely correct that village taxpayers paid for the village water system. You're not transferring, well, you're transferring it in theory to the town. In practicality, you're transferring the cost of the water system to the new water district, which is still right now the village. If you were to sell the ad, put a number, an actuarial number on it and sell it to the town, it's only going to be paid back by that water district. So you're going to sell it and then pay it back with the same people that already have it. So there's not a situation that's occurred in the past, and that's not a general practice of how you do a government reorganization. But you're all right, the village taxpayers paid for that system. But some of the town taxpayers that are in the water district or actually are out of district users, they pay that and their share of that in their rate. The only difference is going to be, and somebody else had a question on it later on, is, why is there a town outside village rate and a village rate? Well, the town outside village rate is higher than the village rate, and that difference is their share of the cost that the village already paid for into the system. And that's going to change over time. When a town takes over, and I can't say take over, the village dissolves, town now has to provide the services. So the town will have a village, number one will be Tannersville Water District. That is as of right, and once you vote, if you vote to dissolve, that district will get created. Then they're going to create one for the users outside of the village, so that they're separate. And over time, the rates will be adjusted and it'll just be the same village, both water districts will be the same as you go on. Your question, though, about the sale of assets and why it goes to pay down a 0% loan, that'll be up to the village board how they decide to do this in the final version of the plan. In a draft plan, as we do in our communities, is we always try to use the sale of assets to pay down any outstanding debts that you have, because the debts are still going to be with you. And once you dissolve the debt, you create that legacy district, your debt is still your debt. So we, as the consultants, always suggest in our draft that you use any assets to pay down any of the debts. However, it's well within the village's right to change that part as they go through the process of the plan, as you saw on the timeline, and state that they'd rather any leftover money after everything's paid out, instead of paying down a 0% debt, they have the right to say in the final plan, we can cut a check to everybody. That's up to the village board as they move forward from a draft plan to a final plan. As you go through some more of these questions and comments, if the resolution passes, there are local conflicts in law, for example, Airbnb, what isn't and isn't grandfathered in? Nothing's grandfathered in. You have 2 years for the town to either adopt the village laws, mingle or hybrid or amend their laws to include the villages, or to get rid of the village laws. The only thing that's still grandfathered in would be a license from a larger entity. In this case, if that cannabis entity was licensed as a dispensary by New York State, it would still continue to be a licensed dispensary. The village zoning law, the town said, is going to be pulled into the town either as they create theirs and pulled in, or it'll be a standalone if the town doesn't have zoning at the end of that 2-year period. And then any non-conforming uses will still be non-conforming legal uses. A question was, why would the town, from an organizational standpoint, have water report to highway? They're not having water report to the highway. They're having water report to the town board and the supervisor. The laborers will go into the highway department as DPW laborers, or in this case, highway laborers. I'm not sure what the next question means. Is this an automatic transfer, or should only the town agrees to do so? The town has to provide water and sewer. They have to staff. Whether they don't have to take the staff, but they're going to have to staff. It makes sense to take the staff that's currently knowledgeable of how the water and wastewater and DPW and stormwater systems work. But as evidenced in the last 24 of these, towns have their own hiring practices, and they don't have to take the village employees, but all indications so far in our discussions are that they'll be transferred over to the town. Village Hall, do you have a question before I continue?
What was that?
Are you done, Lee?
I just wanted to clarify and thank you that I just didn't feel it was equitable to mix what I would call general fund assets be auctioned off to reduce water debt, which would affect 106 users outside the current village boundaries that are water users, and that those assets or proceeds after the debt is paid off, which isn't extensive in for the general side, that then, yeah, maybe the village taxpayers would get a check in the mail that would say, here's your refund for the assets that the town didn't buy or didn't need and weren't part of the water system. So that, you know, we would get the money returned to the taxpayers of the Village of Tannersville rather than giving to the town.
And
Including
that's a very, it's a good idea. And just so you know, sir, it's a great idea and it's absolutely doable. I don't normally recommend that in a draft plan. Because when I do recommend that, then the people that are against the process say that I'm trying to coerce individuals with a tax rebate check to vote yes or no. So I normally do a dissolution plan like this with, you use it to cut down your current debt for two reasons. One, I mentioned already, is it's your debt, and two, because I don't want to look as I'm trying to buy anybody's vote with a tax rebate. But your comment is absolutely on point. That there's 100 and so out of district users, they may get some benefit from that. And that the village board should take that into consideration as they deliberate between the draft and the final plan. In the village of Mastic Beach and town of Brookhaven, it's the only dissolution that we had where when all dust cleared, there was about $150 per taxpayer per property left over, and the town of Brookhaven gave that back a year later. Just so you're aware of, it's only one we've had like that. Did I answer all the other questions you had, sir?
Just lastly, the village is in no fiscal distress because you alluded to the fact that it's difficult for small municipalities to kind of survive, given a small tax base, their area, what their resources are. But currently, the village of Tannersville is in no fiscal distress last night.
Correct.
And it is not struggling to survive on any level other than the point that you said, perhaps it has difficulty finding elected officials or people to volunteer, given its population.
And every
I
village,
just want the public to know that the village is not in fiscal distress, and that's not what precipitated this act.
no, the village is in fine fiscal state. There is no debt. There's very little debt. I can't say there's no debt. There's very little debt, comparatively speaking. You don't have any audits or findings from OCS that I'm aware of in the village of Tannersville. Other villages do have those. We have worked with villages in the past that have a challenge in recruiting elected officials, appointed officials, and even folks that just serve as, you know, village clerk or DPW and the like, and the employees of the community. I did give you an example at the first meeting of a community that was pretty much ended up being a village-run business in which the mayor wanted to retire, but no one wanted to be mayor. His mother-in-law was the village clerk and wanted to retire. His father-in-law was the DPW and trustee. He wanted to retire. And when my trustee moved out of the village, no one wanted to serve, so we had to appoint his wife, so they had a full board. So they had a challenge in a small community of just serving themselves. So when they decided to dissolve, it ended up very good for them tax-wise because the town didn't have a tax. They used their assets they had left over to pay off their sewer debt and went into the new town with a clean slate, so to speak. So that's just that community. Every community is different. For every single one you have a question on, I have a different community that did it differently. So there is no cookie cutter approach to it. We do have to, though, respond to the state outline of what has to go into a dissolution plan. I'm going through some of the questions on the chat box. I would like zoning to be decided before dissolution. I'm not really sure what that means. The town doesn't have zoning. They're going to administer the village's zoning for those 2 years, and that during those 2 years, if they don't have zoning after that, they'll adopt the village zoning as is. And if they do have zoning, they will bring it into their new zoning code. But they're not getting rid of village zoning. At the first meeting, I let you know that there are 3 things that a town can do. It can get rid of zoning. It can create zoning only for that area that's formerly known as the village, make the rest of the rural agricultural or residential, or they can create townwide zoning and incorporate yours into theirs. And they're looking to, they don't have zoning right now, but they've committed to continuing the village's zoning. I already covered the question about what precipitated the decision to start the investigation. It's not an investigation, it's the development of a dissolution plan. We've covered the liabilities and assets already. Gil had another question. He mentioned over 5 years, the village resident would go from paying on average $500 annually for a single home to $575. Why is the town paying higher water rates in the village? We all source the same water. We cover that as well. That's with the differential between the town and the village. Village paid it with their assets. There's a lower cost for village residents than town outside village. Some villages charge 2 or 3 times that amount for town outside village. The Village of Tannersville has decided that an equitable rate for the town outside the village users is $575. Is there another village hall question before I keep going?
I had Margaret, did you wanna? No, she doesn't have, George, you're next.
Yes, can I ask a question involving the village election? I believe it's called Article 15. Can a village actually run its own election instead of having the corrupt Green County Party run it down at 411 Main Street? And I emphasize corrupt. We can run our own election if that's true with a registrar, and we can do it in-house if we do it properly. Am I correct? Or am I dead wrong with the corruption? I'm not.
Well, I'm not here to pass judgment on your utilization of the word corruption. But the villages can host their own village election, like they do throughout the state. Right now, village elections are run by the county. The village is requesting the county to run that. That's up to the village. That's not a decision that I make.
But it is Article 15, right?
I've had some, most of my villages are done, not my villages, but most of the villages that we work with hold their own village election because they hold all their elections on their own.
You answered. Thank you very much.
Any more?
Go ahead, answer.
Phil? Phil?
No, I don't think so.
You're good,
I'll
okay,
talk for golf.
okay, and then Sean, did you want?
Let David go first. Yeah.
Okay,
When the presentation was done earlier, you ran the numbers, with the different items put into the spreadsheet and showed that the village residents on a $62,000 home, if that was the number, was going to have a savings of $1 a day or something along those lines. Then you moved on to the out of village and ran those numbers, but you only ran the percentages and showed those. You didn't actually give a number. Is there a number that you could share with us on what the dollar is for those out of village?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but we didn't run that number because honestly, sir, we didn't run that number because it's inconsequential to the village resident. We did have a percentage there based upon the CETC, but I'm sure if the village board wants us to, we can do the number analysis just to add it, but it's not required. It's a village plan, not a town plan.
Understood. I just quick clarity on that, Mrs. Shawn. So how did you determine the increase to the town outside? Because I assume it must have been on a median. And and then the part B to that, is that at with the increased overhead of the village? Or is it at the current townwide tax levy?
So we have a chart, Sean. It's a very detailed chart. And I didn't want to have to go through this chart because it'll take you probably 15 minutes. But it's in the plan. So since you asked, I just pulled it up. Can you all see this chart?
Absolutely.
Okay. Kathleen, do you want to walk people through the crosswalk for how we came up with the rates?
So the approach that we took was we took every line item of the village budget and we said, what will happen post dissolution? Will it continue? Will it increase? Will it decrease? We made those assumptions and then we took those costs and we applied them to one of the multiple town funds, either the A fund, the B fund, the BD fund, or the B fund. And so what you can see, if you look at this chart, is if you look at where it's the town, we've got the current town levy. And then the next column is how much are we bringing over from the village by fund? And then we say, okay, we had 3 different scenarios, no CETC, 70% CETC, and 100%. And then we're coming up with a post-dissolution estimated town tax levy. So that's carrying everything that we believe would include the overhead, the services, so that we're bringing over $371,000 of increased tax levy in this model. We then, there is another nuance. If you look at the B and the BD fund, if you look at your current taxable assessed value for that, it's $236,000. But because the town or the village of Tannersville will now become part of that town outside village, that tax base goes up. So we're going to take the existing town tax levy plus what we believe is in each of those funds, and we apply it to your taxable assessed value, and we came up with new rates. And we did the same thing for each of the funds. The one cost that will remain in this model on the village tax base is the lighting district. We had discussed that the town would continue to illuminate all the lights that the village currently has illuminated. However, that there would be a tax district, lighting tax district, just as the town has in other areas of the town outside villages. And that would be a charge back to the village property taxpayer. Is there anything more in particular that you had wanted to ask on this?
No, thank you. I think, we're gonna have to spend some time with that spreadsheet and just sort of take a look at it a little bit more and digest it, but I appreciate you explaining it to me, and it's great to see the numbers.
Yeah, and there's more detail. There's more detail in the plan as well. I think it would give you, I think, what you're looking for.
My only concern is the village current levy is 447, and you're saying the town's only gonna go up 314.
No, 371. You have to look at all of the funds together. So you're looking at 314 plus the 31 plus the 26.
Right.
And
And that's in the 447. You're breaking down there's gonna be a $70,000 savings.
Yeah, and again, what is really driving the savings to the village property taxpayer is not that $70,000. That $70,000 represents a little bit more than 10%. The big piece is that we're shifting it from the village tax base to the town-wide and the town outside the new town outside village. Those tax bases are so much larger that it's spreading it across a much larger base. That's what's driving the tax tax bill reduction in combination with the CETC. Those two items represent almost 85 to 90% of the whole impact. So the line items are important, but they are not driving it.
81. Kathy, can I ask you a question? I'm sorry to interrupt. I think there's a misnomer here. Mr. Mahoney, Mr. Kubi, or anybody else in this group, this dissolution is with the village of Tannersville, correct? We decide what we want to do. They're allowed to ask questions, but the bottom line is, if they don't like the numbers and we vote yes or no, it's our vote, not the town of Hunter, correct?
If they don't,
In other words, it's up to us to vote. The town of Hunter or anybody else for that matter, they can have a say in transition. But when it comes to me as a village resident, I'm very proud to be in Tannersville, whether I want to dissolve or not. I have the say, not anybody in Hunter, not anybody in Haynes Falls. We have the say as a village trustees and or voters. Am I correct? We need to reiterate that.
so the answer is ish. And ish.
I'm not Yiddish.
So you have the say and the only vote in dissolution.
Thank you.
But once you vote to dissolve, it's up to the town how to implement it.
Oh, that's up to them, but we have the say.
So that's what I mean by ish. You have the say today. And if there's a vote, you're the only one that has a say at the ballot box. But upon dissolution, the town board decides how the services will be provided and governed and moving forward. So they will ultimately have the control over all the programs. And they have already, they've been very active and involved in this, and I appreciate the town board because you can't develop a good snapshot of what a future governance structure looks like without the open, honest discussions with the town board and their departments. So I'm very appreciative to that because we're giving you as much detail as we can to make that informed decision. But at the end, they will be the ones in charge, and they're going to be the ones with the power to agree or disagree with what we have in the plan.
Not yet.
Hence why I said ish.
Could I just make one more quick comment about the lighting district? The village is currently has a $500,000 grant to do solar for the village, which was intended to offset all the electric usage by the village, including water treatment plants, street lighting, town hall, village hall. Actually, everything was engineered to offset that. So in the future, I'm assuming that's going to get implemented, that project. So therefore, the current village will actually be generating electricity to offset the expenses of the water plant, which of course could be utilized to decrease water rents or water fees in the future. But also there will be plenty of excess to offset the streetlights. So during this plan or during this transition, will those benefits that the village acquired stay with the village taxpayers going in the future to offset that electric bill or that lighting district, saying, hey, they have solar, it offsets plenty of that, and it also should be reflected in the water treatment plants because they won't be using electricity, they'll be producing their own electricity. Is that possible, or is this, it's complicated, but I feel.
And if I could respond?
Please.
We did spend some time thinking through that, and we did not include the impact in the fiscal because everything will have to do with which town utility bills will be used as the mechanism for offset, just as you were saying. So we took a conservative approach, and we have spoken to it in the draft. And we have shown that if it were all to go towards village specific utility bills, it would have one impact. But if it doesn't, that value of that could get spread over the greater tax base. So we spoke to it, but since it wasn't in the fiscal base because it doesn't exist, we just spoke to exactly what you said, that it's going to be, it does have a potential fiscal impact.
So I want to go back to the top of the questions, but the chat box just exploded with chatter on who votes. So because you have about 6 or 7 comments on this, I'll hit that first. A village election or a village referendum is the same as any village election. Only registered voters can vote. Doesn't matter if you're a taxpayer and you live somewhere else. If you're not a registered voter, you cannot vote. And then whether you're a property owner, if you're registered, if you're a renter and you're registered, great. Only registered voters can vote. That's the law. Whether or not you deem that to be fair or not is not part of the process. The law is that the referendum's held like any other village vote, and only registered voters can vote. Not town residents, only Village of Tannersville registered voters. And I'm not here to argue the law. That's the way it is. Let's go through some more questions that you have here. Barbara again asked about the dollar amount of the liabilities. That's been covered. Gil, we covered that question. Residents and voters again, only residents can vote. I'm not going to comment on the village of Hunter and as you go through the village and town.
But what you thought?
that's not here. We already covered CETC.
I have one more person at the village hall.
I have, actually,
Oh, Sean.
I have a real.
Okay, Sean has one. more
Mr. Mahoney's up.
So relating to the legacy debt district, based on what I saw, it looks like, you know, arguably there would be no debt with the village. The only debt would remain with the water district.
Correct.
So that legacy district, is that the same district as the water district, or is that a separate legacy district that has no debt?
So
It
the
doesn't have
legacy
debt, but
district
it.
is only,
it-
a legacy
does
district is
have
only created to cover outstanding debts. The analysis so far shows that your assets will cover your outstanding debts besides the water district. So you may not need to create a legacy district. However, if during dissolution implementation is determined that there are additional debts that were not accounted for or not paid off with the assets, then you would create the actual legacy district.
That was my sort of question, is that, you know, should unforeseen liabilities occur, post dissolution? And should there be a legacy district created even with no debt? Then that would be the appropriate way to go about it, is just sort of that district handles those debt obligations in your.
Correct.
Yes.
I'll give an example. Right, again, Kathleen's analysis was detailed and it's in the plan that the assets will cover outstanding liabilities outside of the water plant, the water district. If someone falls in the next 18 months, trips over a sidewalk and sues the village and wins a lawsuit, $1.5 million, and it's above and beyond what the payouts are, that's still going to be charged back to the former village residents. That will go in a legacy district. And if all of a sudden there are other bills uncovered, there's debts uncovered, or things that occurred that have a cost to it that were not accounted for in the plan, that will go to a legacy district. But if there's no need for one, you don't have to create one.
Thank you. And then finally, last question. The right of first refusal of the town to buy equipment at a negotiated price. If should the village choose, which is well within their right, to sell desired equipment prior to dissolution, right?
Yep.
To satisfy debt or not. Now that is outside of, you know, the discussion that we would want, but that would be the standard surplus procedure that all municipalities have to follow, I assume. This doesn't bring them out of that.
No, they still have to follow the surplus and then auction. But what that does, if they sell everything, which is well within their right, then the town would have to purchase the equipment necessary to provide the services. That's not a legacy district cost, that's a town-wide cost.
Right, so it is in both parties' best interest to negotiate the sale of equipment that would be required to continue servicing the former boundaries of the village. I guess that's the point.
Yeah. It's always best for everyone to work together on a seamless transition. There are some cases where there's deep-seated Hatfields and McCoy situations that it gets very nasty. We don't see that here, and we don't recommend that, because at the end of the day, you're all one. I said this from day one, you're all neighbors. Regardless if you're in the boundary or out of the boundary, you're all neighbors. The animosity, I'm happy to say, has not bubbled to the top here, but it has bubbled to the top in other communities.
Thank you.
Is Alexa still here? Oh, do you want any?
Yeah, my thing is, I guess, more of statement than questions. The tone of this meeting makes it sound like this is a done deal, and this is not.
I've already covered that 3 times, ma'am.
Yes, I know, but this came out of like, for lack of a better word, rumor or town gossip that someone was circulating a petition to dissolve the Village of Tannersville, so the board decided to meet it head on and examine it itself. The people of the Village of Tannersville, who are here and are registered voters, have the right to vote this for or against, and I don't think that's being emphasized enough. Everything seems to be gearing it towards this is a done deal.
I'm not really sure why people keep saying this is a done deal. Our charge is to, the village has to.
Crossed in this presentation and the questions.
No,
that-
and I'm gonna say it one more time, and then I'm not gonna address it again.
Yeah,
This is not a done deal. The plan that we've created is what the plan is set forth by New York State law when a village board goes through a board initiated process. Then from here, they have a decision to make whether to continue it or not. Our task, which we did very well, if I may say, is to identify and understand what the future governance would look like per state law of what goes into a dissolution plan. From here, it's up to the village board if they want to continue the process. I'll go to public hearing, if they want to go to referendum or not.
okay, well, I understand that, but for this.
Okay, but if do you have a question? Because if you have a question, I'll be happy to answer it. If you have a
Yes.
comment, I'll ask you to hold it to the public hearing.
Okay, well, I think for the small amount of money that people are gonna save, they're gonna lose a lot if they're absorbed into the town, because then they're gonna.
Thank you. That's considered a comment. And at the public hearing, it's all comments, not questions. So I want to get to I only have, we're supposed to go to 8. I'll go a little longer. I want to make sure I answer as many questions as I can. And if not, any questions that are in the chat, will be answered on the FAQ page by Friday. Will the town hunter take position on dissolution or consolidation? If the town, no town that I've been involved with, except for one, has taken a formal opinion because it's not their vote. It's not their decision. They didn't push this and they didn't request it. The town hunter, should the village choose to dissolve, stands ready to provide the services as discussed already. Will the slides be publicly available? Yes, they'll be up on the website tomorrow. Someone asked me to state 6 positive reasons to approve and adopt this plan. That's not my role. That's up to you individually. In the actual plan, there's an executive summary, which gives each resident the opportunity to check a box for themselves as to whether or not the item is a pro or a con to help them decide whether or not they want to vote yay or nay. But that's not our role here. Where can we go if we have questions after this meeting? As stated before, you go to the project website under FAQs. You can read all the other 30 questions so far, and you can submit questions to be answered weekly as we add up. Steve, you had a comment about Michigan in the lottery. I'm not going to get involved in a discussion, a commentary, but it's been said that town will comply with DRI. Upon dissolution, the town automatically becomes the new executor of all grants, and they're going to move forward with implementation as the SIP has been approved. If those of you that have been following what DRI is, the village was a recipient of $10 million award. They developed a strategic investment plan that was adopted by the state. The governor announced where that money will be given to, with both the private projects and the public projects, and the town will move forward on the few public projects that they have to administer. Commentary, there's a lot of comments about voting no and voting yes. That's not for me to answer. Again, there's a lot of comments about why the village chose to do that. I've already covered that.
Ben, this is the mayor. I just like you mentioned that it was we were actually shown the petition. They had enough signatures, so if we allowed it to become as a petition, we would have had no time. This wouldn't be going on. Okay, so just so everybody knows that it wasn't like a rumor or anything like that. It was, we had to make a choice, and we felt this was a better choice as a board.
I say this, and I know people are going to say I have a personal agenda here. I don't, but I always recommend that a board take the initiative should there be a petition coming to undertake the process, because it gives you, the village, the ability to take time to do the fiscal analysis. What we've done since basically April, and this goes through the actual vote, should you choose to vote in January, that's a 9-month process that if you did the petition way, it slammed into 3 months. So I applaud communities that take that leap. It's not an easy decision to do, but it's something that gives the residents here the opportunity now to have 3 meetings, review the plan, and make an informed decision which way to go. So I'm just happy that you chose to do that, because you're giving your residents the opportunity to read, analyze, digest, and make an informed decision. It's not, and I want to reiterate, I don't want to speak for you, Mayor, but this is not, this by no means says that the village board supports or endorses the concept, but you're doing what's right as government leaders and providing the village residents the opportunity to move forward.
So can I interrupt you? Does that say 70 people on chat right now?
Comments.
70 comments?
There are quite a number of comments and or questions.
So
going back and forth.
So our mailing evidently hit home, the mailing that we requested definitely hit home. People got on the phone, thank you.
I have a curiosity question. If the voters of the village of Tannersville decide for this to go through, can the village still be identified in signage upon its boundaries? Village of Tannersville?
No.
But I'd like
It will
to.
not be the village of Tannersville, it'll be the hamlet of Tannersville. You can call it historic. It won't be a village. So the term village is unique in New York State over other other states in the union. Village is a municipal identity. It's also sometimes equated to a dense area. They call it the village. But in New York State, a village is a municipal governance structure. You're incorporated, and the difference is that you control and you're a political subdivision unto yourself. A village can only exist within a town in New York State. If you choose to dissolve, you're no longer a village. So your government structure ceases to exist, and therefore you're no longer the village. You will be a hamlet, a place. You could have a sign saying, welcome to historic Tannersville. You can have a sign saying, welcome to the hamlet of Tannersville, but you're no longer a village. In other states, the term village is used anecdotally to reference a hamlet or an area of density that is village-like. But in New York State, the term village is a governance structure.
Thank you.
I sounded like a teacher there. I sound like my father. I apologize. So we're close to 8 o'clock. Lucy has told me that all the meeting chat is recorded through Zoom, so we can go through them. And when there are questions that we are able to respond to, we'll put them on the FAQ. But again, we're not here to decide for you. I have no horse in the game. Kathleen has no horse in the game, or in the run, in the race, so to speak. But we strove to come up with unbiased information so that you're able to make your own informed decision as the pros and cons. Gil, you added a number of comments. None of them are questions that I have to answer. They're just commentary here. One of them is who's going to bid on village assets town doesn't want? It goes to auction. Once they go through the surplus process, it goes to auction. And quite frankly, we've had some communities, I call it a fire sale. It was at the fire department, but they auctioned off their gazebo, and they auctioned off their chairs, and they auctioned off their tables and their file cabinets. So that's there. Other comments you have in there are commentary. That's not questions for me to answer. Will there be an option for absentee voting? Yes, but you have to follow the normal absentee voting process of requesting an absentee ballot. Okay. There was a question in here that I want to share that I scrolled over. CETC, it goes to all of the town residents. It doesn't go to just the area formerly known as the village. Everyone will benefit because the village is gone. So what happens is the new town budget, if anyone looks online at a town budget, at the bottom of the analysis, it says amount to be raised by taxes or a tax levy. That will then be reduced by a minimum of the 70% or the maximum of 100% or somewhere in between there. And that'll be the new town amount to be raised by the tax levy. So everyone in the town benefits. If you go back to Kathleen's discussion on the fiscal model of the post-dissolution impacts, it shows that amount by no CETC, 70% and 100% to village and the town residents. The purpose, one of the purposes that the New York State had when developing the CETC was they acknowledged that in dissolution, normally village taxes go down, town taxes go up. From the reason exactly why Kathleen discussed, going from a smaller tax base to a larger tax base and in addition the costs. The CETC goes to everyone in the town. You will see it if you choose to dissolve, you'll see it on your tax bill. Your tax bill, according to the law, says that you have to show what the tax would have been and what is now saved by the CETC as provided by New York State and your final amounts. Your tax bill will have 2 additional lines on it. With that, is anyone left at the village that had a question in the village hall? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to close this for now. It's a public meeting. It's not a public hearing, so it's not really closing it. So we'll end this public information meeting. We're going to post tomorrow the PowerPoint in its entirety. We'll take this extra slide that we just went over, that we had on hand, and put it into the slide deck. So you'll all have that information. When the village board approves the draft plan, we'll get that up online. You'll see again in there an executive summary that goes into each of the items we spoke about today and provides that checklist for you all as village residents for pro and con. The village then will go through its process of the agenda and timeline that we set forth, of endorsing the plan and then having a public hearing, and then can also during either before then or after then, we can amend the plan and then move forward with the process. There was one more question, was the dissolution affect government grants or awards on DRI money? It doesn't affect current ones, except the town will take over as the administrator of them. The DRI money is given to the village, which then will go to the town to administer. And it's a misnomer that is given to the village, when the vast majority of those funds are slotted for private investment projects. And again, it's all a reimbursement program. So for those private projects, the housing, the commercial development, the rehab, they have to do the work to get the money back from the state. And if you recall, in our transition of personnel, the town has already identified a need for a grant administrative position. So they're intending to be able to administer the grants should they be charged with doing so going forward. With that, I want to thank you all for participating, staying on so long. We started with about 65 people. We have still about 56 plus what's in Village Hall. I always want to thank you for taking time to participate in the process, to listen to what we had to share. I hope you take time to read it again when it's online, and I hope you take time to read the draft plan when it's available, and continue to avail yourselves of the Q&A portion of the website. And we hope to see you all again soon. Thank you and have a good night.